All right, so we're going to start soldering. We need to solder 2 wires on. We'll solder the power wires, and we also need to solder power wires from the VTX to our flight controller. So what we'll do is we'll look up the schematic for the flight controller. We've already done that, but we can show you the schematic off screen. And what we have is we have to pay attention to the 2 portions. So we're going to hook these wires up to these 2 pads, this one here and this one here. The square pad is ground, which is black. So black goes to the square pad, and red is the 5 volts, and it goes to the circle pad. So it's just these top 2 right here. And then for the power for the battery, which this plugs into, we will go and solder to these 2 pads. And we'll decide which direction we go, if we're soldering through the board this way or through the board that way. Let's double check the schematic here to see ground. Okay, so again, ground will be close to this USB port, which is right here, and this will be the 5 volts. So the black wire goes to this one, and the red wire goes to that one. And vice versa, if we flip the top over, this is the ground. As you notice, it's a square, and then here's a circle. So what we'll want to do to prep it, you'll cut the end off the VTX. This was on there, but go ahead and cut it off with your cutters, and then strip back the wire with your fingernail. You can pull a piece of the wire off, and then you'll want to twist the ends. This will give us the best soldering connection. And then because our work is so small, I'm going to end up cutting the lead to make it even shorter. So there's the lead. I'm going to cut this one about in half as well. So they're very small, and that's because the pads that we have are also very small. So to make our life easier, what we'll do is we already have our soldering iron heated up. We'll apply solder to the tip of the iron. We don't need too much, just a little bit. And if we have the cooling sponge pad, you can drag and kind of just get the excess solder off. So what we'll end up doing here is we should get the helping hands. Since it's quite difficult to solder, we can use, there we go, that'll be good.
Pretty perfect. Very.
Okay. So to help us solder, we're going to clip this into the soldering board. So actually, we're gonna, if we want the light on, yeah.
Sorry. Nice. Oh, beautiful. Now it washes it out.
Oh, now it does.
Yeah, we're good.
Oop.
I would take it off. There you go. Yeah, we should be able to.
Sorry.
Perfect. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to apply solder to these 2 pads. Very carefully start a little bit on there, and we're heating the pad up. And we have a little bit on there, so I'm just going to heat that pad up. You notice I don't put a ton on there, and I go back in between and wipe the solder off onto my sponge there. So we'll come again right here, just a little bit of solder, heat it up, make sure it's on the pad, and let's see, hopefully the light's not too bright. Oops, too bright.
You know what? I think. Hang on. I think there's a way to make it. like 4 or less, like that. Do you see
Okay.
that? I don't
Yeah.
know if that'll change it.
Let's see if that
but
helps. Oh, that's like focus. This is like
right there. You,
okay. So we applied our 2 solders there. What we can do on these 2 ends, which is our VTX, we can also apply solder just quickly to the tip. So I guess I'll use this other one here to clamp this down. And I'm bending the wires just so that they're kind of hanging in the right spot. So quickly put the solder underneath the soldering underneath the wire and touch quickly, just like that. Just a little bit of solder. That's all we need. So you'll see it melt very quickly, and that is the only amount of solder that you need. The majority of the solder is actually on the board already. So again, this is our ground pad. So what we're going to do is take the black wire. We're going to place it right here. I come from the edge like this, and I'm going to quickly tap. Oops. I'm going to clean off my tip because it's not very clean. So let me get that clean. Oops. I think, let's just see. That looks, it's okay. It's not the best solder, but I think that will work. And we'll line up the red here for this one. Everything happens very quickly. It's just a quick touch of heat. There we go. So we can zoom in and get some extra pictures to show that connection. But things you want to check for is make sure that the solder is not going between the 2 pads and that these wires are not touching. If the wires are touching or the solder goes between the 2 pads, you can short the board out, which means it won't work. So I'm going to maybe dress up. I'm going to turn the light on this real quick here just to see a little bit better. And I'm going to fix this black one. I'm going to knock some of the solder off right here. There we go. All right, I'm happy with those solders. So it's very difficult to get these wires on. Somewhat challenging, but there we go. And I guess I'll check with the magnifying glass to see how I think it looks.
That's actually pretty good.
So yeah, not my best solder, but it'll work. Now that we're done with that, the last part is to do this connection here. So ground is here, which is black, and then that is power. We'll do the same thing again. We'll put some solder here. Heat that up. So I'm heating the pad up, making sure the solder is going all across the pad. Same thing here. So that should be enough. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to, this is the bottom side of the board. So this makes sense to have the wires coming out like this. So this time around, I'm not going to put solder on these 2 because I have plenty of solder on there. And what I'm going to do is put the black in first. So I'll melt the solder. Once the solder is hot enough, I should be able to push the I should be able to push this wire through. Okay, I didn't have any luck on that one. I'm going to switch to the red one first. Okay, so that one went through nice and easy. I was having a harder time with the black one here, so let's just clean it up a little bit. And I think this is why I have this braid of wire sticking out. So what I'm going to do is use a soldering gun iron to push it back in like that. Now it should go in. Now notice that I'm not melting the solder, so I'm going to add a little bit more because solder conducts heat well, and if you don't have enough solder, sometimes it doesn't conduct, but there's a fine balance between too much and not enough. So my fingers are in the way, but let's get this thing through and then I'll show you. Okay. All right, so I'm kind of looking at everything to inspect it, make sure everything looks good. I'm going to just touch this quickly. Clean that up. And everything looks good on the back side. If you'll notice, it's really hard to see, but this wire is sticking out quite a bit. So we can take our side snips and cut that off if we want. Otherwise, I think that length is okay for us. But if you do have a really long length of wire coming out, make sure you trim it. And that should be it for our power. We can test the connection now. This should power up nicely to see if our connections were well. So plug that in. Ooh. And we saw some smoke. That wasn't good.